All right, and I will, so let's begin. So hello, museum families, and welcome to RBCM at Home Summer, a play date through screens across British Columbia and the world. It's been a little while since we did one of these, but we have a whole library of sessions that are recorded, and you could find them all on our Royal BC Museum YouTube page. It feels really good to be back and doing one of these. Okay, so my name is Chris O'Connor, and I'm a learning program developer at the Royal BC Museum. The museum and my home is on the territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Songhees and Esquimalt nations here in Victoria on Vancouver Island. And today we're doing this in partnership with our very good friends at the Greater Victoria Public Library, specifically joined by Rudy Patel. Welcome, Rudy.
Thank you. Hi.
We're so glad to have you here. And because we did this last summer too, so it's so nice to see you again. Feels like the summer is not complete until we do something together. So it is summertime, and many of us do a bit more traveling around, whether it's within our city or our town, or further out into the wilderness for camps or camping trips. And we notice the trees are a little bit more green, and there seems to be more animals about in the air flying around or on the ground crawling and burrowing. The special word for all of the living stuff around us and how it's all interconnected is called biodiversity. And we don't need to go out into the wilderness to see it. If you have a backyard, you can see it there. And right now in my backyard, there's a family of hawks and several ravens and deer and other things. Very exciting. For the Royal BC Museum, as you'll see on the screen, our backyard is the native plant garden just outside the museum walls. And today we'll explore our backyard with our Curator of Entomology, Dr. Joel Gibson. But first, Rudy, in our partnership, you put together a book list about backyard biodiversity. I'll share that in the comment section. But do you want to first, welcome, and do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do at the library and what you have for us?
Sure. So thank you so much, Chris, for inviting me. In the summertime, we have a really great program called the BC Summer Reading Club program. And this is a really exciting program for you to catch up on your reading over the summer. And so we still have the program running. You can come to any of the public libraries to pick up a reading record. And this will help you keep track of all the books that you may have been reading since you were at a school, or if you're homeschooled, to all the books that you have on your bookshelf. So you can come into the library to pick up a free reading record, and you can collect stickers along the way. So each week you can grab a sticker, and as you grab a sticker, you can also receive a prize. So we've got lots of really great things happening for prizes. We've got $50 gift certificates to the bookstore. We even have a $50 gift pass to the IMAX Theater at the Royal BC Museum, so that's pretty exciting. And of course, you get a brand new book that you get to keep and your very own medal at the very end of reading for 7 weeks. So we encourage all of you to visit the public library to pick up your reading record anytime before mid-August, and take out some books that we have. And like Chris had mentioned, there's going to be a book list attached to the session today, so you're more than welcome to click and link into our Greater Victoria Public Library website. Thank you.
Great. Sorry, I'm going to remove the spotlight. I just put the book list on the comments section and on Facebook Live. And can I see that book again that you were?
Yeah. So I'm hoping that we have a little bit of time to read Butterfly.
Sure. I can't wait. Do you want to do that right now?
Sure.
Do you want to do that?
That would be great.
Should we look at in the backyard and then come back to the book? We could end with.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Great. So we're going to zoom outside into our native plant garden to say hello to Dr. Joel Gibson, who is the Curator of Entomology here at the Royal BC Museum. Curator of Entomology, two words perhaps that are new to you. So Joel, welcome. And what do those words mean, curator and entomology? And what do you do here at the museum?
Well, welcome, folks. Thanks for having me come and talk to you. And curator is kind of anyone that works with a collection of anything. So I always like to think of it like when I was a kid and I had the books on my shelf or the books I brought home from the library, I had to curate them, sometimes by color, sometimes by subject, sometimes by size. So putting any collection together and kind of knowing what's in it and what it means and how you can use it makes you a curator. Entomology means I specifically work with insects and spiders. So my job here is to work with our really big collection that's in the museum and in the exhibits of insects and spiders. But also part of it is to sort of keep the collection up to date by seeing, is there any new stuff we're seeing in BC? Is there stuff that's different than there used to be? And plus just knowing about all the insects and spiders all across British Columbia, that's the other big part of my job.
And I would imagine, Joel, that there's a lot of insects and spiders, like different kinds of insects and spiders in BC. So
yes, there's not only a lot of them. I mean, if you've ever kind of sat somewhere that was a little bit too buggy and you start getting bit by mosquitoes, or you're at the beach, or you find a bunch of spiders or pill bugs in your garden, sometimes there's just a lot of them. But the other thing is there's a lot of different kinds. Like you said, Chris, there's a lot of different species. And sometimes the more you look, you're like, oh, wait a minute, there's a lot of different spiders and they're not all the same. And then you notice things, you're like, oh, wait, there's a whole bunch of flies or butterflies. And so that's the other part of my job, is the biodiversity part, where we're like, I study bugs, but there's thousands of different species just in BC.
And so, Joel, why is it important that there are lots of different kinds of insects and spiders in British Columbia, not just like a couple? Why is the diversity of insects so important?
Well, it's a good question. And I often think of it like people, and they talk about like diversity of people. There's different types of people and everybody does different things. Well, there's diversity of species too. So all of these species are doing different things. Some of them are on plants, some of them are in the soil, some of them are in water. And then also there's like, how are they interacting with each other? Are they eating the plant, or are they spreading the seeds around? Are they doing both? Are they eating each other? Are there some insects that are eating the mosquitoes, which I'm kind of happy about, so then the mosquitoes aren't eating me? So the diversity part is also, how are they all different? And then what are they doing? And then also, how are they moving around? If it's really hot today, is there going to be less of them? And if it's hot a couple years in a row, is there going to be different insects than if it wasn't as hot? So all of these things, we need to know all the different types so that we can ask those kind of questions.
And I imagine as a scientist, I mean, you're working with a collection. So unfortunately, a lot of the insects that you work with are not alive anymore.
Yeah.
But so you're not looking at behavior as much, but I imagine that's part of your work as a scientist, is just to understand, like, how are they moving around? How is it different from this year to last year? How is it different from this year from 50 years ago? In terms of
and also some of the behavior, it's interesting you say that. There's the behavior stuff. We do a lot of that in the field. Like, yes, we will collect some purposely to bring back to the collection to be able to find out what they are, but we'll also do what we call observational work. So we always have, I think it's funny, I actually don't have my little orange notebook, which I always have, because that's where you write down and say, oh, wait, I've never seen it on this plant before. I better write that down. Or I didn't know that these insects ate those insects, or why is it only in the shaded part of the pond? We do write a lot of those observational things down. And it's funny, they always kind of make their way into it. When we write a paper or a book, we'll sort of put them in there. So we'll go back to books from years and years ago and say, oh, wait a minute, someone did notice this 60 years ago, and it's written down here in this book. So all those observations always make their way in.
It's interesting, Joel, that you were talking about diversity of insects and the different roles they play, that there's a diversity of scientists too, like different observations that are made by different scientists, and by sharing that information around, that sort of creates a greater understanding of the world around us.
And that's one of the big things, like with being a museum scientist, is part of our job is to do more of the sharing. Like, part of our job is to, here's what I learned from other scientists, and we're going to share it through museum programs, or we're going to put it in an exhibit. So we're always a slightly different type of scientist in a museum, just because we have to be ready to share a lot of different stuff. And it's one of the reasons I like it. I like museum science because of that.
And I was just thinking, Rudy, like, your tools of a librarian might be like the cart that it kind of looks like maybe you have a cart behind you, or maybe you have like different kinds of pens and pencils and different kinds of like things that you use, the tools that help you do the work and do the amazing work that you do. And Joel, I'm noticing that you have a tool in your hand. Do you want to tell us about that?
Well, like we were saying, if we want to be able to grab something, there's a lot of different ways you can do. One great tool, I mean, it's not how it always was, but now you can just use a phone or a camera is a great tool. A net is a great tool, but both of these are really just things to help you with the most important tool, which is your eyes and your ears and your brain to sort of notice what you're seeing. The net allows you to sort of stop something moving around so that you can put it in the net and look closely. And then usually we let it go because we're like, okay, we don't need to, so we made our observation, we can let it go. Sometimes in the museum, we do have to bring it back to the museum. But the same thing with your camera. If you use the camera to take the picture and then you go home and look through it, you're like, oh, wait a minute, I didn't realize there were 2 bugs in this picture, or I didn't realize this one's the same color as something else. Or what often happens to me with pictures, I get home and look at it, I'm like, oh, I thought this was a bee and it's not a bee at all when I look at the picture. So the tools are there to just sort of extend your ability to observe things, especially with bugs, which are really small and they move fast. So that's why you got to use a net to slow them down enough to see it, or you got to take a camera, which can take a very long picture for a quick observation.
So if you were to come, maybe you didn't work at the Royal BC Museum and you're just coming into this area for the first time, what do you think you would find in terms of insects, just from what you know? Like, would you be looking at the trees, looking at the kind of vegetation, looking at its relationship to like cityscape that's just so near to the native plant garden? Is what would you guess you would find within this environment?
Well, the neat thing is always it depends who's coming in. Like if somebody just read a great insect book at home, and they might be thinking like, oh, I'm thinking all about butterflies today. Or someone might come in and say, I'm thinking all about plants today, or I'm thinking all about water, or I'm thinking about how, you know, maybe a lot of parts of the city, there aren't things. And then you stumble onto this garden and realize, oh, wait, there's all these native plants. So it always depends on what the person bringing into it is looking for. But if you're ever trying to like maximize what you're going to see, start with flowers, because that's what insects are doing. It's always the easiest thing is, okay, and most times of the year, with the exception of like the most extreme part of winter, in somewhere like Victoria, there's always flowers somewhere, and that's the best place to start. So like here, I'm going to start with these white flowers just because they're really obvious. And yep, there's insects on there. You know, there's little beetles that have found these as well. And these aren't, and there's a little fly over there on that bunch of flowers. And all of these, that's always the easiest thing to do.
And then
just
they fly
because,
away. Right.
oh, and they fly away right away. That's why it's, you know, take a picture or use a net. Oh, and then it hovers right there to tease you. So flowers, always your best part. And also when it's a little bit more sunny and a little bit less windy. Because as soon as there's a lot of, if there's a lot of clouds and it starts to get cool or starts to get raining, the insects don't go away. They don't die. They just hide. So they'll be like underneath the leaves somewhere, and then they're really hard to see. So when it's sunny, they come out and they fly around. Although it can get too hot for them too. Probably even later this afternoon when it gets really hot, there'll be a lot less insects because it's just too hot for them. They got to hide in the shade at that point. And then if it's windy, they just get blown around. So on a day like today where it's not that hot yet and there's no wind, this is the best time. And really, you can just sit in front of any given flower and wait. Like science is hard work, but it doesn't have to be that hard of work if you've got a good place to sit.
So we want to see you work, Joel. So can you, how would you use that net? How would you use the net tool there? Yeah.
Well, this is where, okay, here's the fly that we were all challenged with. Oh, wait. And the other nice thing is if insects really like one certain type of flower, they'll keep coming back. So if you wait long enough, it'll come back to you.
Oh, so quick.
Well, so quick, but he was quicker because it's not in there.
Oh, yeah.
And the other thing you can do, the other neat thing with insects is that most of the things when they fly up. So if you always kind of swing at them from above, they'll fly up into the net. Little trick to remember. Most things that fly up. Oh, there's one. Oh, and she got away.
Speaking
The
of,
other,
oh,
oh, go ahead.
no, speaking of diversity, I was just thinking about how this is more like an active net, but then you also have passive traps too, where you just leave a trap up and then come back later to see what, is that true?
Yep, there's certainly things you can do that will fly around, and then you can wait and see. And sometimes you'll dig them into the ground for things that crawl. Sometimes you put up like basically you just kind of put up nets. I've even seen people that when they were driving through places will put these on their car out the window, and they catch things. It's not as accurate, and I mean I don't have to work that little.
Yeah.
Oh wait, here's a good one to catch. Oh wait, and then it flies away. The other neat thing is you always got to think about where you are and what it means, because one thing that I'm seeing a lot of, and I'm trying to catch one just so I can prove my point, but a lot of these flowers, particularly these yellow flowers right now, have honeybees on them. And you're like, okay, honeybees are neat. We know that they're pollinators, but they're not actually from this part of North America. They're originally from like Central Asia and Europe. So we're like, okay, there's a lot of honeybees here. And obviously people have them because they want to have honey and they know they're pollinators. But why are there so many here? Well, because I know across the street, there's a lot of honeybee hives and the people are keeping them for the honey. So it's kind of funny. You find places that you'll find a lot of them here because I know those are bees from across the street that are just flying here every day to look for pollen and nectar in these flowers.
Is that at the Empress? They have
yeah, at the Empress Hotel, they have a bunch of beehives, I think right over top of the parking structure. And they're not very obvious because you don't want people wandering up and kind of messing with the beehives. They might get stung, but the bees all end up over here.
Right.
So a lot of what we're seeing here are honeybees. And of course, like as soon as I'm on camera and I get nervous, I can't catch anything.
Sorry. There's a lot of pressure.
It's
just,
a lot of
just
pressure.
your action alone, Joel, the flick of your wrist is like very impressive. So
okay, this one definitely does have a honeybee. And the other thing too is you got to be careful because honeybees, as some of you might know, unfortunately, they do sting.
Yeah.
So you want to be careful. Honeybee.
Oh yeah.
And we don't know for sure, but I would probably guess this is an Empress Hotel honeybee. It's coming over here and we'll take it back to make some more honey. So someone later this year is going to have their high tea with honey on their toast and in their tea from honey produced by this bee.
Which is a great
example
of that kind of interconnectedness of biodiversity, right?
Yeah, it's all here.
Leads to another action, leads to another action.
Yep. And also neat here, especially with something like this. Like I don't all know what all of the plants are. I know they're native plants. I know they're really well taken care of by our curator of botany and a lot of volunteers that help them with it. So they know the plants that are in here, and they're all native to this part of BC. So it's also kind of neat to come in here and talk about stuff because you can ask someone and they'll tell you what plant it is. So that helps me because I don't know my plants very well. I can always ask Ken or one of the volunteers and say, oh, wait, I saw something on the big yellow bushy flower, and they'll be able to tell me what it is. So that's the other part of science and biodiversity is like, oh, it's always collaborative. Like you have to work with other people on it because it's more fun and because you learn more when you kind of share all of your knowledge about stuff.
And especially at the museum where you're the curator of entomology, but like you said, Dr. Ken Marr is the curator of botany, the curator of paleontology, curator of vertebrate zoology. So all these different areas that are being like considered, and there's expertise in each area. I imagine, Rudy, it's similar to like the library where there's different skills, and the collection of those skills make for a really special place.
Absolutely, yeah. I just, if I have a second, I just wanted to mention that there is this really wonderful book that I have for families. It's called The Wildflower, Let's Wildflower the World. And this is so wonderful because you'll recognize a lot of these plants and trees and bushes around town. And they've got a really nice explanation on how to grow them and how to collect seeds and what to make from them. So it's just a really nice family type book that you can go through with lots of great information.
So I recommend people go to the library, get that, come to the Native Plant Garden and try to make some comparisons of what you're seeing in the book with what you're seeing in the, or in your backyard.
Just sit and see what you can see, because there's, when you sit long enough, you can see lots of stuff on a day like today.
I can appreciate that. Sorry.
No.
Dr. Gibson, I can totally appreciate that because we often have, scavenger hunts on our story walks, and we always ask families to use their eyes and their ears to observe, because that's one of the best ways to see and hear what's around you.
Yep, and that's all. I mean, that's all science and observations, just seeing it and sharing it. That's it. Those are the only two rules of science. You got to see something and you got to tell somebody about it. That's it. That's all you got to do in science. I
was mentioning earlier that that there's this hawk family in my yard right now. So I hear them out there, pew, pew, pew. And then I like run to the window with my binoculars and see them. But yeah, like hearing and then seeing, and the active like seeing, because it's sometimes, I imagine, Joel, for you too, it's like you're really good as a curator of entomology seeing what insects are around, but sometimes they, like intentionally, because of camouflage or other things that it might be hard to see the insects that are around you.
Well, and some people just have it. There's a word we use like search image. And it's always funny because it doesn't matter like how old you are, or it's not like the tallest or the shortest people can see things. Sometimes people just get it in their head and they're better at seeing certain things. I have a hard time finding beetles, but I go out with other people and they can see beetles on the ground really quick. So it's kind of funny, especially if you go out with a group of friends or your family. Some people will see certain things and other people will see different things. It's just the search image in their head. They get used to seeing it differently, which is always kind of a fun thing.
So Joel, last question before we go to our book, or last question for me, but then I'll give you the last word if you wanted to say anything that we missed. But what might you see in the Native Plant Garden that would really excite you, that you would be surprised to see, and that you would like, that maybe you particularly love to see when you have an opportunity to see it?
Well, it kind of touches on something, and I noticed this morning right when you came out. I swear I didn't have this question ahead of time, but I mentioned to Jenny when it came out here, and I got all excited and ran over, that here, and this is a Nootka rose, which is like a native plant from here, and you see these little bushy things on here? That big bushy frond, that's actually from a wasp that will lay eggs in one of the leaves, and then the leaves turns into that instead of a rose.
Oh, wow.
And if you wait over the winter, and this is exciting for me because I'm going to come back here later this winter, and I'm going to talk to Ken, the curator of botany, and say, hey, let's see what wasps are in there. And if you actually watch it over the winter and wait, probably in about March, wasps will start coming out of there. And the thing is, there could be like 3 or 4 or 5 different types of wasp. It depends on like which ones laid their eggs in it. And I didn't know we had these in the garden. So that's the other thing here, is you can kind of do things long term and follow up and say, hey, I saw this year. And if you look down here, this is a big one from probably last year, the year before, that all the wasps came out last winter.
Oh.
So I'm going to keep an eye on some of these other ones and see what they are, that was very exciting for me because that's something I've just started to notice about plant galls. They're called galls, G-A-L-L.
Right.
And every type of plant has some type of gall. I just got to figure out which ones are which.
So it's really interesting if you're collecting that if Ken were to collect that for the herbarium, the botany collection, then, but it also has a story around the entomology collection. So it
ends up being both.
It ends up being both, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, that's
is there anything that, Joel, any last words?
Well, just that it's great. I mean, and I love the idea of, sit and read a book and then take what you've learned from a book and go out in the garden and use it right away. And even better, if you see something really neat in the garden, come back and write your own book and then somebody else can read it. So speaking of that, hold tight, Joel, because here comes Rudy.
So I've got a really great book here, and it's called A Book of Color. Color is Butterfly, Butterfly by for a sec. And this is all about different types of bugs that you might find in your backyard. So we've got a snail or slug, caterpillars, beetles, spiders, ladybugs, worms, dragonflies, lots of different types of insects. So butterfly, butterfly. One day, Lucy saw a beautiful butterfly. She played with it and chased it all around the garden. The next day, Lucy couldn't find the butterfly anywhere. But she did find a pink earthworm wriggling along the ground and a brown spider busy spinning her web. Then Lucy discovered a green beetle and a family of very spotty red ladybugs scurrying around. She saw a snail with an orange shell slithering, and 3 purple caterpillars munching a leaf. A shimmering blue dragonfly, and a yellow bee with a stripe buzzing about. But Lucy didn't see the butterfly anywhere. She looked and looked in the bushes, in the tree, even in the watering can, and under a plant pot. Lucy laid down in the cool grass to wait. Then, high in the sky, there it was, the colorful, beautiful butterfly. The end.
Yay.
There you go.
That was beautiful. I'm glad Lucy found the butterfly. And not just any butterfly, but like a pop-out butterfly that was
That's
flying.
right.
I love when you were like opening and closing that the wings are fluttering.
Yeah.
Too.
There's a couple of things about this book that I just wanted to quickly mention too, is that it's a little bit hard to see, but there are holes in the book, in the pages.
Oh, I was wondering that.
And what it is to show the different colors that it lands on. And so you'll see that on this page, it's blue, but then on the next page, it will be a different color. And also there's one beautiful page, this one right here, where Lucy's looking up in the sky. What you can notice in this picture very closely is that all of the little insects that she found are somewhere in this page.
Oh, nice.
So it's a little bit of a hide and seek book as well. So there's lots of layers of this book.
Right, and it's a great message in terms of while looking for one thing, you also see all these other things. And I imagine like with Joel also with like as a curator too, you might be looking for something and see lots of different things along the way.
Well, that's why you got to be ready to sort of like, whatever I see, I'm going to make note of it and tell people about it.
Such a beautiful book and great tour of the garden, Joel. Rudy, I'm thinking like, also I would like take that book out of the library and come down to the Native Plant Garden and read that as well. So it's a great, where Joel is right now is the sunken garden part in front of the BC archives, and it's a great place to hang out if you're in Victoria, but if you're not in Victoria, in another place, and find a similar great spot too. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. And thanks, Rudy, for partnering with us on this. And thanks, Joel, for joining us in our backyard biodiversity exploration.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, folks.